Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Game Things. I'm your host for the week, Ming, and today we'll start off our episode by talking about a rather interesting title, or at least the controversies surrounding this title. And that title in question is The Day Before. So if you guys have never heard of this title before, it's effectively an open world survival game. And why is there so much controversy for this title? Well, here's the thing. Originally, the game was set to be released last year, but well, due to delays and news about Unreal Engine 5, they kinda pushed the release of the title to this year, supposedly around March, April-ish. Now, effectively, right before they were supposed to release more footage for the game, the devs kinda dropped the bomb and said, hey, we kinda forgot to trademark our game, and yeah, because of that, we can't release the game with the title The Day Before. And because of this particular issue, we're gonna delay our game by an additional 9 months. So yeah. And quite frankly, me as a gamer, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure, you forgot to trademark your game, but can't you just use a different name? If the game is ready, you don't have to delay it by 9 months. Come on, guys, you can just change the name. It won't really make that much of a difference. But no. So yeah, they delayed it by 9 months, and quite a lot of people are not happy with the decision because, quite frankly, they said that, okay, so why do you need an additional 9 months for this issue, you know? Are you trying to scam all the gamers that are waiting for the game, or are you just trying to generate more hype for the game before it's released? People are just unhappy about the situation in general, and yeah, I mean, it's a pretty shitty situation, and only time will tell what exactly is going on for this particular game, and hopefully moving forward we won't see this type of excuse anymore. So yeah, that's basically the news that we have for The Day Before. It's pretty controversial, and quite frankly, us at Game Things would like to know what you guys think as well. So if possible, drop a comment on your opinions on the matter, and we'll respond to it when we see it. Moving on, we'll talk about the Xbox and Bethesda Developer Direct. So Minecraft Legends will be arriving on April 18th this year on PS5, PS4, Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, PC, as well as Game Pass. Moving on, we'll be talking about the next title featured in the Xbox and Bethesda Direct, which is Forza Motorsport. Quite frankly, me myself, I'm not really a fan of racing games, so this will be a pretty short segment. And effectively, what's coming to Forza Motorsport? Well, you have things like dynamic time and day, dynamic weather, as well as more than 500 cars. And the game is supposedly going to be released sometime this year in Q3. Next, we'll talk about The Elder Scrolls Online Necrom. This expansion is set to be based around Eastern Morrowind and will include a brand new playable class, the Arcanists. So yeah, for all you Elder Scrolls Online fans out there, be sure to take note of this and hop on to the game when the expansion is out. Lastly, the last title covered in the direct is, well, Redfall. Redfall just recently revealed their 10-minute gameplay video, and it basically shows off the game played in either a solo setting or up to 4-player setting. I've watched it myself, and I think it looks pretty decent. They showcase a couple of characters, some of their unique abilities, as well as I would say boss level, I guess. It somewhat reminds me of the Hive stages in Back 4 Blood, where you have to kind of kill this big heart and then go against a lot of waves of vampires. So far, based on the gameplay that I've seen, it looks decent, pretty interesting. And well, if you pre-order the game, you do get some pre-order bonuses. But in any case, if you're not interested in all these pre-bonuses and everything, you might still want to mark down the date that this game will be released on your calendar, and that date is the 2nd of May this year. Alright, next let's talk about something that was, pretty hyped up recently, The Last of Us. So if you guys have been, not living under a rock, you would know that the HBO series The Last of Us has been killing it, I would say. And while the series has been in fact killing it, that is not what I would use to describe the games, because recently Naughty Dog has announced that they will be moving on from Uncharted, and they might be done with The Last of Us. Of course, it's not 100% confirmed that they are done and dusted with The Last of Us, but still pretty shocking news that, we might not get a Last of Us 3 or a spin-off or something related to the Last of Us universe. While they said that they are moving on from Uncharted, there's supposedly an Uncharted 5 tease, so quite frankly, we don't know what the actual situation is, but I guess we just have to wait and see and hope for the best that in the future we'll get more news on a potential Uncharted 5. Next, we'll be talking about Dead Island 2 and a rather interesting mechanic. So Dead Island 2 has announced that instead of using the general skill tree, they'll be moving on to a skill deck. What's interesting is what the developers announced about this skill deck. Apparently, players are actually able to change skills mid-air and land with a different loadout. And I quote, that's what the developers said. This particular statement is actually pretty confusing if you ask me. The reason being is that can the players just freely switch up their skill cards? If you can just freely switch up your skill cards, how would it work? Especially like if you're going to play multiplayer and everything, does it mean you pause the game for everyone as you switch up skill cards? Typically for most other games out there, your skill cards are already set before you even start the mission. So yeah, it sounds pretty interesting, I would say, and I really hope that they shed more light on this particular mechanic so I can cover it in maybe the future episodes. Moving on, let's talk about the really hyped up game for February. Hogwarts Legacy is right around the corner, and supposedly the game will have more than 100 side quests. And in fact, these side quests are so impactful that it can even impact the main campaign. If you are a player that just generally skips side quests for most other games, you might want to reconsider that choice for this particular game because you might not get the full ending if you skip side quests. Who knows? But in any case, Hogwarts Legacy is gonna come out soon, and I personally am extremely excited for it as well because based on the gameplays that I've seen so far, it looks pretty freaking good. And hey, it's gonna be the first actual good Harry Potter game, so yeah, I would definitely try it out when it's released. Moving on, let's talk about this year's E3. So it has been reported that Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony will not be attending this year's E3. A pretty big bummer if you ask me, because those are some of the heavy hitters in the industry, and the fact that 3 of them would not be attending, there's gonna be a lot of news that are not gonna be presented at E3. I mean, sure, at the end of the day, Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony will present their news via their own means, but in any case, I still look forward to E3 because there might be other bangers that will be presented in that yearly event. Moving on to our last and final news for the week, we'll be talking about Disney Dreamlight Valley, specifically its 2023 roadmap. So yeah, Disney Dreamlight Valley, the Disney-based Sims game, will include multiplayer support, new characters such as Simba and Mirabelle, new realms for players to explore, and much more. Well, if you've never heard of the title and are interested in Sims, then hey, maybe give the game a shot. Next, we're gonna talk about some delays. So aside from the day before, we also have the Dark Pictures Switchback, which has been delayed to March 16 this year, and it will no longer be a launch title for the PSVR 2. Aside from that, Star Wars Jedi Survivor has also been delayed to the 28th of April this year. So effectively a 6-week delay to further enhance game stability as well as the performance and to do some bug fixes. Next, we move on to our next segment featuring some games that you can get your hands on right now, starting with Hi-Fi Rush. So Hi-Fi Rush, which was released recently, is available on PC and Xbox Series S and X. Hi-Fi Rush is a rather interesting title, with its unique aesthetic which just reminds you of comic books, as well as its rather interesting gameplay that features rhythmic-based combat. And well, being a rhythm game, the game also has banger soundtracks. If you're just looking for something different with a really nice art style to bring back the nostalgic feeling of the good old comic book days, then yeah, I would say Hi-Fi Rush is surprisingly a sleeper game that you should definitely check it out. Moving on, we'll be talking about Inculinati, a rather interesting roguelike strategy game. Now, why do I say that it's interesting? It's mainly because of the concept of the game. The entire concept of the game is you're gonna play a roguelike strategy game using, well, ink, as well as characters that you draw with said ink. Of course, you don't actually have to, draw the characters, but you get the idea. It's the concept of the game. You draw your characters and play the strategy game. Well, I would say based on the footage that I've seen so far, it looks somewhat like Darkest Dungeon, where you position your characters at a certain order and they can hit only a certain range, and your characters, if they die, they get turned into ink. So yeah, a lot of concepts that are somewhat similar to Darkest Dungeon. I would say if you're into strategy roguelike games, maybe give Inculinati a shot. Moving on, we'll move on to our third title this week, which is Deliver Us Mars. Deliver Us Mars, which is the sequel of Deliver Us the Moon, is a survival game based on, as you guessed it, Mars. The main protagonist, which is the youngest astronaut of her time, will be exploring Mars to supposedly extract a stolen resource from the prequel of the game. If you've previously played the title Deliver Us the Moon, you would know that the entire premise of the game is focused on a lot of exploration and puzzles, and same goes for Deliver Us Mars. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Deliver Us Mars will feature a lot of exploration as well as more puzzles, but the developers have mentioned that the puzzles will not be as boring as Deliver Us the Moon. Instead, it'll be more engaging, so the players would see more interesting things. So if you're looking for a more gameplay intensive type of game, then Deliver Us Mars is not really the thing for you. But if you just want to enjoy a decent story about space, then Deliver Us Mars would be perfect. Lastly, the final title that we'll be covering this week is The Pathless. So The Pathless is not a new game, but it will be re-releasing on Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, as well as the Switch this week. The Pathless, if you've never heard of it before, is brought to you by the developers of Abzu, a really aesthetically pleasing and great game. And what makes The Pathless different from Abzu is that instead of the original game where you just kind of explore the waters of the ocean, Pathless instead is more similar to Breath of the Wild, because it features hovering on top of a hawk. Well, yes, Link doesn't fly with a hawk, but the aesthetics and the setting really reminds me of Breath of the Wild. And with that, we move on to our last and final segment, free things. So first off, Epic Games Store is gonna give out City of Gangsters, as well as Dishonored Death of the Outsider. Subscribers of PS Plus, you guys will be getting Ollie Ollie World, Evil Dead the Game, Destiny 2 Beyond Light DLC, and for PS4 players, you guys will be getting one additional title, which is Mafia Definitive Edition. For subscribers of games with gold, you guys will be getting For the King, as well as Guts and Goals. Lastly, for subscribers of Prime Gaming, you guys are getting The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind Game of the Year Edition, Onsen Master, Aerial Knights Never Yield, Divine Knockout, One Hand Clapping, Bats Bloodsucker Anti-Terror Squad, Space Crew Legendary Edition, Tunshay, as well as Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator. So yeah, make sure to redeem all the titles that was mentioned above, and well, that basically marks our end of the episode. Once again, I was your host for the week, Ming, and I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we will see you guys next week in another episode of Game Things.